It's safe to say the new academic year didn't start the way college leaders across North Carolina had hoped. Joining us for an expert assessment of the ups and downs of the return to colleges and universities is Jenna Robinson. She is president of the James G. Martin Center for Academic Renewal. Jenna, welcome back.
It's good to be here, Mitch.
So it hasn't turned out the way that people had planned. There were schools that were planning to bring students back. Some did, and fairly quickly on,
Right.
Some of them said, no, we're going back to online.
Right. I think that they could have rolled that out better. The schools that did bring their students back, a lot of them brought them back without a testing plan. They only tested students who came in and said, I'm pretty sure I have COVID, instead of doing, either pooled testing or testing everybody as they returned. They just really didn't have a robust testing plan in place. And I think that's the reason they had to turn around and send everybody home so quickly.
And in some cases, from what I understand, North Carolina universities stand in contrast to those in other states that did have some more robust plans in place.
Absolutely. Even Duke, right here in North Carolina, they have a robust testing plan and they are still in person.
What kinds of problems is this creating for students? Obviously, this is not what they signed up for.
Right. A lot of problems. I mean, obviously, there's the logistical problem of thinking you were going to be, in your university town, on campus or off campus, and then having to go home. But also, there's the problem of having to take all of your classes virtually instead of in person, which is not as easy as it could be.
Now, almost all of these schools have been dealing in some ways with virtual learning because most of them shut down in the spring and finished the year that way. Is the virtual learning that students are having now different from what they had at the end of the last school year, or is it still more the same?
For the most part, it sounds like it's more of the same. Faculty did get some training at most schools, but it was superfluous training, not superfluous, but, very surface level training, the kind of training that makes sure that they aren't making amateur mistakes anymore. But it's still not a well-developed online virtual environment. It's Zoom U.
And we have seen some concerns among people who follow these issues very closely that it looks as if the university, especially the University of North Carolina, decided, hey, let's tell everyone that we're going to have in-person classes and have them pay as if they're going to have in-person classes. And then as soon as the bills are paid, we're going to go back to online. Is that criticism warranted?
I think the criticism of keeping the fees the same and the tuition the same is warranted. Fees in particular, because clearly students are still getting an education. They're getting something, and the quality obviously varies. But they are very clearly not getting an athletics experience. They are not getting the student activity experience. They're not even having access to the student health center. And those are all fees that they pay, which are supposed to be directly to support services that they receive. And so I think, to me, the fees are the more important one, especially since here in North Carolina, we do keep tuition very affordable relative to other states.
And we didn't even mention room and board. If you paid for your dorm room to come back and now you're not in that dorm room anymore.
Right. Well, fortunately, they did refund housing and dining. And so that is, obviously an inconvenience, but the students will get their money back.
We are chatting with Jenna Robinson, who is president of the James G. Martin Center for Academic Renewal, a group that keeps a close eye on public education at the higher education level in North Carolina and across the country. As you look at the University of North Carolina and the situation that it faces now, what are some of the things that you want to see moving forward?
Well, I want to see a plan for robust testing for spring. I do think that in person for most students and for most classes is still the ideal for a university education. I think virtual learning can be a lot better than it is. And so the other thing I think they should be working on is improving their virtual models. It shouldn't be just logging into Zoom a couple times a week.
We knew this was going to be an issue way back in the spring when things first shut down. Does anyone deserve some blame for how this was rolled out, or is this one of those situations, as we've seen with other things with COVID-19, that no one really knew what to do?
Right. Well, I think that some blame belongs with the university administrators who waffled for a long time about what fall was going to look like. Students didn't know, professors didn't know, and I think, crucially, if professors expected that they could teach hybrid courses or in-person courses, they weren't preparing those courses to be online. And the preparation is very different for an online course than for an in-person course or even a hybrid course. And so I think if university officials had from the beginning said, have a virtual plan, that we would be seeing better virtual courses right now.
Do we run the risk for the students who are in universities right now that the spring semester of 2020 and the fall semester of 2020 are going to, in some ways, end up being lost in terms of the education that they get?
Well, as I've heard from many sources, justifying keeping tuition the same, the students will still get those credits. But whether they've actually learned anything during that time is totally different. I've heard from several university students saying they're just not absorbing the material in the same way. It's hard to pay attention. It's hard to interact. The classes are just not set up in the right way. And then, of course, there are some things you just can't do online. You can't do your labs online. And yet they're still trying to. And so, yes, in terms of, educational outcomes, I do think that this fall, at least, will be a lost semester.
And what kinds of problems does that set these students up for in the future if they do get just sort of a bare minimum sort of education, but not what they need as the building blocks for the rest of their
Right.
career?
I think it's going to be especially hard for the students who are missing out on practicals during this time. If you're a nursing student, if you are doing a lab science, the things that you learn in those in-person hands-on courses, can't be replicated online. And they're going to have to make it up. You won't necessarily have to make up Spanish 2. You checked that box, you moved on. As sad as it is to say that it doesn't matter for their future, probably for most students doesn't. But for the practical skills that students in those hard sciences have to learn, they're going to have to go and do it again.
And one of the things that's coming up, speaking of doing it again, is the James G. Martin Center for Academic Renewal is going to be talking about online education again. Tell us about your event coming up October 1st.
On October 1st, we're having an event via Zoom, of course, about online education. We have a great panel lined up. We've got Marty Kotis, who is the chairman of the Working Group for Online Education for the University of North Carolina Board of Governors. We've got Doug Shackelford, who is the dean of Keenan Flagler Business School and was also involved in creating their MBA Online, which is a very well-respected online program. Catherine Truitt, who is the chancellor of Western Governors University in North Carolina.
Which is an online school.
Which is an online school, mastery-based. And then Scott Rawls, the president of Wake Tech, which has been voted #1 for online education for community colleges. And we also have a student panelist to talk about her own experiences. And so I think that it's going to be a great panel, and we'll be able to talk about what really works and how do we get this right.
Well, we hope that the University of North Carolina gets it right, if not in the coming weeks ahead, certainly by the time of the spring semester. One person who's going to be watching very closely as the university makes its decisions is Jenna Robinson. She is president of the James G. Martin Center for Academic Renewal. Jenna, if someone wants to participate in the October 1st event, what should they do?
They should go to jamesgmartin.center and click on events, and they will see it right in front of them.